Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Today we are working on our next lesson in our volume unit, and it is lesson 11-3, and it starts on page 465. So if you haven't yet, pause the video, grab your workbook and a pencil, and open up to page 465. Now, I want to give you a little forewarning. This is one of the lessons that can be a little tricky. Okay, it takes a little bit of time to understand. There's a lot of little steps to it. So I thought about possibly not even doing this, but I did want to expose you to it because it is a lesson that we are supposed to teach in 5th grade. So we're going to do it. We'll do a few today, we'll do a few tomorrow, and then I think we'll kind of wrap it up. But I did want everyone to just take a deep breath, understand that this might be a little bit tricky, but there are certain rules and sort of steps that you take that will help you solve each of these, okay? So I want everyone to just kind of take a deep breath. We're going to go through this. It's new, but if you can follow along with me with this video through the whole entire video, I think it will be super, super helpful. Okay. So again, we're on 465. This lesson's called Combine Volumes of Prisms. So last week we worked on the volumes of rectangular prisms, right? So there was straight rectangles, right? And now we have these weird shapes, right? It almost is like two rectangles put together. So that's what we want to treat it like, right? We almost want to separate them because we know how to find volume of rectangles, and we want to figure out if we found the volume of one and we found the volume of the other one, and we put those together, then we can find the volume of this funky looking shape. So that's what we're going to work on today. Like I said, just try your best, write everything down with me. I'm going to try as best as I can to go slow, and you can always pause the video and go back if you need to. But let's get started on the solve and share. So the solve and share for this problem says Ariel is thinking of a three-dimensional figure that is made by combining two rectangular prisms. What is the volume of this three-dimensional figure? Okay, so like I said before, we have two rectangles kind of stuck together. Now, part of it that becomes hard to do is separating them, right? Figuring out where you want to kind of draw that line to kind of cut them, right? Or if they were, let's say, a big block of cheese that was shaped like this, how could we cut it so that we had two rectangles, right? And in each case, there are two different ways that you could cut it. And there is a way that you definitely don't want to cut it. So I'm going to kind of show you the two ways. Now, I went ahead and for each of the problems that you're going to do today, I already drew these lines for you so that it made that step, it kind of took that step away. So that's one less step you don't have to worry about. But for this one, I'm just going to show you. Now, we see that there's this kind of part here. We're going to call it A with this rectangle here. And this rectangle here could go all the way to the bottom, right? And I could draw this line here. So that means I have this whole rectangle, right? A, and it's behind, it also goes behind here. And then I have this smaller rectangle here in the front. So that's one option, right? If I drew my line around it right there. Now, I'm going to take that line out and I'm going to show you another way that you could draw it. If I wanted to, I could also cut it this way, right? I want to cut along this line. And now I have this rectangle just up here, and then the B one is underneath, right? It goes all the way back there underneath A. So that's another way that we can cut it. Either way is completely correct. And when you do it either way, you're going to use some of the different numbers here, but you're going to end up with the same exact answer. Now, here's what you do not do, okay? Do not do this. Do not make a diagonal cut to a corner. Because if I thought about what this looked like, that's not going to end in a rectangle, right? That is not going to make these two rectangles. They're going to have a weird like slanty part of them, okay? So that is a no, 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 and that is something that a lot of people want to do. So like I said for today, I already cut the shapes for you, so this should be fairly easy. Now, I am going to cut it, I think this way. We'll do this way for today, okay? And so what I want you to do right on your on your page, I want you to draw this same line, right? So kind of just from this line here, kind of connect it all the way down to the bottom. And then I want you to label your two rectangles, A and B, okay? Now, we have to work with them separately, okay? We're going to work with A first, and then we're going to work with B. And remember that every time we're finding volume, we want to use our formula. Length times width times height. That's a little messy. Sorry about that. So we're going to find that same thing. Now, I want to talk about something. When you have a rectangle, that does not look like a rectangle, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay, when we have a rectangular prism like we had last week, a nice regular one where we can see the whole thing, if you look at a couple of its sides, right, this side here and this side here and this side here are all parallel sides, okay, and they are all equal. If I look again, I can find that this one here, this one here, this one here, and this one here are also all parallel and equal, okay? And then you'll also notice that this one here, and this one way back here are also all parallel and equal. So those things come in handy when you're looking for the length, width, and height of these different parts of these prisms, okay? Because sometimes it might not be these front ones that are the easiest that are labeled. It might be one of these other back ones that might be labeled. But remember that any of the ones that are parallel to each other are also equal to each other. Okay, so I'm just going to move this out of the way. So for A, first I want to look for, I'm going to do this. Let's do this. Let's say my lengths always go across. I'm going to do those green. Now it could be here. There's no label here. It also could be back behind B, but I can't see that. But it also is up here, right? So my length across the front of A is 4 centimeters. Okay, we got it. Now I want to look for the width. How far back does it go? Now if I look right here, it has a 6 here, but I want just this little part here. I don't want this whole line. And that's where you need to be careful because there are numbers on here that are extra numbers that you might not need, right? Depending on how you cut it, you might not need that number. So if I'm just looking for this little one, I don't want to guess and say, well, it's a kind of half, right? I don't want to guess and say it's about however many, right? I want to be for sure. So I want to look at the other parallel sides or lines that are the same, right? And when I do that, I can see that it goes 2 centimeters back. All right. And then I want to look at how tall it is. Now I have two things here. I have this one that says 5 and this one that says 7. Well, when I cut this, right, I cut that all the way down. So I cut it parallel or the same as this back one. So I want to use 7. Okay. Now this is the hardest part of this, is really dissecting these problems and finding what numbers to use. I really believe that all of you can multiply 3 numbers together and then add them together. I'm pretty confident in that. This is the tricky part, okay? So just take your time, try your best. It's kind of something that you have to get used to, but I believe in you guys. I think you can do it. Okay. All right, so now I want to find the volume of this, okay? So I want to multiply. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 7 is 56, okay? So the volume of A, just this top box here, right, is 56 centimeters cubed. Now I'm not done. I only found half of what I need to do, okay? This is why you're only doing 4 problems today. They take a little bit of time, okay? That's okay. So now I'm only going to focus on this box down here, this little one in the front, right? I'm going to focus on box B and I want to find its measurements. So I'm going to look for my length, right? My length across the front. Well, I can see that those are the lengths I want to look at, and I have one labeled here. It is 4 centimeters. Excellent. I want to see, all right, well, again, over here, it's not it's not 6, right? It's not this whole thing here. I could do a little math and say, well, I did find out that this one was 2, and if the whole thing's 6, well, I'm guessing this one's 4. Or I can also just double check, because usually they've labeled one of the sides that you need. Okay, so that one is 4 centimeters wide. Now we want to look for height. Okay, so let's see, how tall is B? And it's pretty nicely labeled here for us with 2 centimeters. Alrighty, if we multiply those together, 4 times 4 is 16, and 16 times 2 is 32. 32 centimeters cubed. Okay, now I found the volume of B, I found the volume of A, but now I want to find the volume of this entire weird figure, right? The whole shape all together. So what I want to do when I find these two is then I want to add them together. So I can just do that over here, right? 56 plus 32. Add, thank you. 6 plus 2 is 8, and 5 plus 3 is 8. Okay, so my total volume is 88 centimeters cubed. Now, we just did a lot. I wrote down a lot of words, a lot of numbers, a lot of math. So hopefully you kind of paused and went along as I went along, or at least was writing some stuff down. So if you haven't, I want you to really pause the video right here and really write down as much of this as you can. If you need to kind of go back and look through it, you're welcome to. I'm going to go over a few more problems with you. And then, like I said, there's only 4 problems that I want you to attempt today. So they do take a little bit of time. So that's why I'm only giving you 4 problems to practice with today. But once you've copied this all down, let's flip the page and look at the guided practice. Okay, so now we flipped on to 467, and we're looking over here at the guided practice, all right? And for right now, I'm going to go through numbers 1, 2, and 3 and do all of those with you, and then I'm going to have you attempt to do 4, 5, and 6 on this page. No, 4, 5, 6, and 7 on this page, which are 4 problems, okay? So first thing that I want to do is I want to look at numbers 1 and 2. Okay, so I'm going to move this up here. And numbers 1 and 2 say, use the solid below. The dashed line separates into 2 rectangular prisms A and B. And then it asks you what are the lengths, widths, and heights of prism A, and same thing for prism B. Now again, like I said, with these other ones, I also drew the line on all of these in your, I drew the line on the Google Slides, but I'm going to draw the line on here for anybody doing in their workbook in a moment, and I want you to copy that down so you know where at least to draw your lines. So this one did it for you, which is helpful. And then you, again, want to look for our same exact formula, length times width times height, okay? And we can go back to using the same colors if we want to. Okay, if I want to look here, so the first question, number 1, says, what are those for A, and then what are those for B? So it's for A, again, I want to look here. Now this is saying this whole front part is 6, so is just the length of A 6? No. So I want to kind of look to see what other parallel lines I can look at, and sure enough, up here, I see another number, right? I see 4. The screen is a little bright, that's okay. All right, so now I'm going to move to, what did I do? Red, I think? Yeah, red for my width, okay? And I want to go how far back. Now, I can't really see the side over here because it's behind the B, so I kind of want to use either this one or this one. And I see that this one here is labeled. It goes 3 feet back, okay? And then it says, what is the height? So this is a fairly easy one. Usually the height is pretty easy to find. So height goes, how tall is this A? And it is 12. Now, all right. The other thing that it does here is it doesn't actually ask us to find the volume here. So for this one, we really just need to write down what the measurements are. So we did that. Great. Now we're going to do the same thing for prism B. Okay. We're going to look at prism B. And, where's my, oopsies. eraser. We're going to look at my eraser here. Now, if I look for my length, again, this little piece here is not 6. I want to use one of the other parallel lines, and I see up here that it is 2. I want to look for my width. How far back does it go? That one's nice and labeled for us right here, 3. And then I want to look for my height, okay? How tall is B? Okay, 5 feet. All right, so we have all of our answers here for number 1, right? That's the biggest part of this, is really pulling out the measurements for each of the prisms and really figuring out what numbers to use. Because once you do that, you can use a calculator and you can multiply the numbers really quickly, right? And that's not going to be the hard part of this, okay? So this is where you need to take your time and really, like I'm doing, go through, go slow, look at all the parallel lines, see which ones, which number is labeling the right part, because there are a bunch of numbers. If you notice, like I'm going to go through here and I want to look at all the numbers that I didn't use, right? For this one, there is just, well, no, there's 2, right? We didn't use this 6 at all. We didn't use this 7. Okay, there are going to be extra numbers. Now you might say, well, why would there be extra numbers? Well, like I said before, and like number 2 asks, is there are other ways that you can separate these shapes, okay? So for example, I'm going to take away all of this stuff like I did, and I'm going to look at number 2, and it says, what is another way that you could cut this shape, right? So instead of cutting it that way, I could also cut it across here so that I have like this rectangular shape right here, oopsies, right? And then one on top. This is kind of like if it was see-through, which is not making it easy. Okay, that doesn't help. But I'm cutting it not like they're side by side, but that one is on top of the other, right? So if I cut it this way, then it's like B is underneath A. Now, when you do that, you're going to use different numbers, because when I do that and I look at my length across B, I am going to use this 6, right? That is what I'm using. I am using this 6 here for A, for my length across, or no, actually that's B. I'm using my 6 across, okay? Now it does ask us to go through and find all the right dimensions. I don't feel like we need to do that right now again, but I just wanted to kind of point out to you that there are other numbers, because there are other ways that you can cut these. So for today, I cut them for you, but just know that there are going to be some extra numbers that you don't use, and that's okay. All right. So it's totally fine if there are numbers on your shape that you don't use, because if you had cut them a different way, then you might use one of those in one of the other measurements. All right. Okay. So next we're going to work on 3 and 4, but I'm actually going to move this over so we have a little bit more working room. These don't give you a lot of space, so know that you're probably going to need some scratch paper to kind of work out and write out all of these equations and measurements. All right, so let me just flip over to the next page. And here I've just kind of moved the page over a little bit so you can see 3 and 4, and then I have a little bit of workspace here. All right. So when I look at 3, the first thing that I want to do is I actually want to cut these up so that you can see how I cut them up on the Google slide for anybody that's doing them on the Google side. If you're not doing them on the Google side and you're doing them in your workbook, make sure to cut them the way that I'm doing them, so that if I need to help you, I know which way that you cut them, because it's I think easiest if we all cut them the same way. So it's hard to label it because it's super small, but this box here, this smaller box, I'm going to label that one A, and I'm just going to put it down here because it doesn't really fit. And this one over on the side, B, okay? Now, in a minute, we're going to go through that one, but for number 4, I also just want to show you that this one, you especially want to do it the same way I'm doing it. You want to cut it across this way, because if you cut it the other way, you'd have to actually cut it into like 3 pieces, which you can do, but then you'd have to find 3 separate volumes. You don't want to do that. All right. And then I'm going to call this big one on top A, and this smaller, longer one at the bottom B. All right. So let's get started with number 3. Okay, always just write it down. Length times width times height. Just write it down. It's going to help you, right? So let's get started. Let's look at here. I'm going to start with Prism A. This first one, that's kind of like this small little sliver on the left-hand side here. And I want to look at my length, okay? If I look at my length here, I have a 15, but it looks like 15 is this whole front side. So I don't think 15 is the length of A because I cut right there. So it's not all of it. So I also, like I said before, I don't want to guess, right? I don't want to say, well, I think it's this. And then it's hard to look because then I say this one here. I want to say this one going back this way, which goes behind here, so I can't really see it. Now I've erased everything. Okay. We want to try to find where the measurements are for this one's length across. When I look at this one, I can see that one of those green lines that I highlighted is labeled, right? And it's not this whole thing, it's this one here, right? It's labeled with our 10 inches. So our length for that one is 10 inches. Now we want to look at our width. How far back does it go? I have a lot of lines here. They kind of get in the way a little bit, those colored lines. They're helpful, but when it's small like this, it's a little bit tricky. All right, so my width is how far back. Now, I want to look at over here, right? How far back? Because I don't have the part over here that's like behind the B, right? But if I look right back here, I see that it is 7 inches. Excellent. And then I want to look for height. How tall is this little sliver of A? And it's really easy to see over here that it is only 2 inches. Okay. When I multiply those together, 10 times 7 is 70, and 70 times 2 is 140 inches cubed. Now again, like last week, if you want to just write inches and try to write a little 3, or you can always write cubic inches, right, for your units of measure. Now I'm only halfway done with number 3. I want to look at Prism B, this other part over here, okay? I want to look at that one. I always do that and I think it's being helpful, but then I'm writing right over the numbers. Great one, Mrs. Wright. Okay, here we go. If I look at the length, again, I could do some math. So I knew this was 10 and this part was 10, so then I have something left over. Or I can also look at some of the other parallel lines, which in either case, you're going to see that it is 5 inches. Okay, 5 inches for B. Now I want to start to look at my width, how far back. A lot of these have a similar width because they are the same width going back, like one is not longer in its dimension like that way. So many of these have similar, you'll notice that many of the shapes have similar widths going back. So this one is 7 again, times our height. We want to find our height. I don't see something here, but I can go back to another line that is parallel. And this one I see is 8. Okay. Then I want to start to multiply. 5 times 7 is 35. And then because I'm using a handy dandy calculator, which I said you're welcome to do because these numbers get big. And really, we're not worrying about multiplication here. We are worrying about volume. So feel free to use your handy dandy calculator when you're figuring out these volumes. 35 times 8 is 280. 280 inches. Oh, that doesn't look like an N. Cubed. Okay. Now, total volume, because I'm not done. I'm pretty much done. I'm almost done, right? But what I want to do is I actually want to add those together. So I want to take 280 from Prism B, and I want to take 140 from Prism A, and I want to add those together. Here we go. And you end up with 420 inches cubed. Ha! Lots of work. Long video. Like I said at the very beginning, this is one of the trickier of the lessons and probably the most tricky lesson that we have left. So take a deep breath. You got this. It's all good. If you mix one up, it's no big deal. We're just trying it out. We're trying our best today. Okay. I am here to answer any questions. What I want you to do right now is make sure that you pause this video and write down all of this work that I have here for number 3, okay? That is going to really help you when you're looking at doing the next couple of problems, okay? look at all the work that I did. Use it. All right. That's going to be really helpful when you're trying to figure out, well, how did she get that answer? Okay. So just follow all the steps that I followed. You're going to attempt to do number 4. Like I said, before you end this video, if you're working in your workbook, make sure you draw the line where I drew the line and label these A and B. I'm also going to click to the next page and show you that for 5, 6, and 7, what I want you to do is I'm going to show you again where I drew the line or where I thought easiest was to draw the line. Okay, so this one here, so there's a small one on top and there's a bigger prism on the bottom. This one here, I'm going to go straight back with it, and there is a bigger one down here and a small one up here. Okay. And then for this one here, kids always want to go straight to the corner. Don't do it every single year on this problem. Okay. We're actually just going to cut it this way, like along this line, so that it's this rectangle here, right? And then this rectangle here. All right. So once you cut along, I'm going to erase it so I'm not confusing you. Once you cut along this line here, okay, you're going to have prism A and prism B. So make sure you label those in your workbook first. If you are working in the Google Slides, those are already done for you on the slides. What you need to do is you need to write out your dimensions or measurements for A, for B, right? You're going to write out length, width, height, and then you're going to add those together to get your total. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. You have 4 problems today. You have 4, 5, 6, and 7. You can do it. I totally believe in you. And for today, I want everyone to give it their best shot. Tomorrow, like I said, we're going to work on a few more practice problems of these. And tomorrow I will be holding a math meet. So make sure that if you have a lot of questions today, know that tomorrow we're going to go over a bunch of this. So do your best today, and I will talk to you guys soon.